So the news just does not stop. Blizzard have sat down and have posted their new Q&A where they've answered the community's questions from BlizzCon. And I think some of the answers you're not going to like, some of the answers you are going to like, and I'll be honest with you, some of the stuff we already know. But there's some real interesting little gems in here, and it gives you a little bit of an idea on what they're actually thinking when it comes to big decisions that affect, well, thousands of people. Such as the first one being, why didn't you announce Wrath-era realms? Basically, they've said that there's just too many versions of the game, which is actually understandable, but I do truly believe it's something we really need. They have actually said, though, that back during TBC, they wanted to make sure that they worked on each expansion in such a way that they could very quickly bring one back again. So if all of a sudden there was so much noise that we need Wrath-era servers, they could quite easily just spin up a Wrath-era server without too much work. I'm sure there's some work involved, but ultimately, it wouldn't be a big waiting game. It would be like, I don't know, maybe a month or so, and boom, they could put a Wrath-era server on. And the next one was, can you please share more specifically? What is your current idea on an increased leveling speed for 1 to 80? Again, this was quite an interesting answer because where the leveling is being sped up, or where they're looking at speeding it up, is not exactly where I thought it would be. But then when you really think about their answer, it kind of does make sense that it's where it is. Because what they've said is they want to make the level 1 to 60 to be the focus because of how it's reworked in Cataclysm. If you don't already know, in Cata there's going to be hundreds of new quests throughout Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and obviously quests that you're already familiar with that are just made either quicker, easier. The zones are more linear, so they work, you know, a little bit more like Northrend, Outland, or even the Cataclysm zones when you go into them, where you simply just go backwards and forwards getting quests, and you're not doing all of this zone hopping. So they want the focus to be on 1 to 60, but they actually want the sped up piece to be 60 to 80, so you can jump through Outland and Northrend a lot quicker to be able to then quickly get into the new content in Cataclysm, which definitely does kind of make sense. But another little interesting thing that they said during this was they will introduce Joyous Journeys, you know, periodically, like they have throughout Wrath. They'll do that for the 1 to 60 zones in Cataclysm, so that kind of does mean we already knew that the Joyous Journeys buff will go either when the pre-patch hits or when Cata actually goes live. But they have sort of compared what they plan on doing between 60 and 80, basically, to Joyous Journeys. So it's probably not going to be massively quicker, but it's going to be quicker enough to not be too painful. Next up, a really good question is they asked what will be done to the guild changes to make them more accessible and useful in Cataclysm. And again, what they basically come back with was what we've already spoke about on this channel. The fact that cash flow can make for a really toxic atmosphere because you've just got people spam inviting hundreds and hundreds of players just to benefit from that extra bit of gold that goes directly into the guild bank. Because if you're not aware how cash flow works, basically there's 2 ranks, but let's say 5% of all gold that you make or while you're leveling, you know, what you're grinding mobs, whatever you're doing, goes straight into the guild bank. So people will literally just make guilds full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people just to benefit off of your hard work, you know. So they see that as a problem straight away, which is great. And the other thing is what we've spoke about on here before as well, which is the guild challenges. So you have challenges to do a handful of dungeons each week, to do a raid each week, and to do a few rated battlegrounds each week. They've said that the bigger guilds clearly are going to have a bigger advantage at this because they've just got more chance of getting it all done every week, which then ultimately affects how quick your guild levels, because each of those challenges that you complete has obviously got an XP, like guild XP reward attached to it. So again, kind of obvious that that was going to change. They'll probably just reduce the amount of challenges, or I don't know, make them give a lot more XP. But yeah, there is less of them. So ultimately, you can still level the guild as fast, but you just don't need to do as much of the stuff. Now, a really interesting one is, can we expect to see the return of the disenchant button when the items are rolled out? And this was a really, really quick answer, because simply the answer was yes. When Cataclysm launches, we're going to get the DE button. Why wait till Cata? Put it in now. The amount of dungeons people are doing, gammas that people are doing, and we've got cross-realm RDF, kind of like doesn't need to wait until Cataclysm. It was in Wrath originally, so put it in Wrath now. And also, is there any solution in Cataclysm for the gear score meta, making it impossible to gear up ults because I get constantly rejected by groups? And what they basically said was, that's what Titan Room dungeons are for. The only interesting thing that did get said, actually, without being too toxic about this, because It was a rubbish answer. They might as well have just said, no, we're not really doing anything, because there's nothing they can do. This is not against Blizzard. It's just the fact that what can they do? The whole gear score meta, and how much gear score we expect for each dungeon, that's decided by us, the community. We should be looking at being like, no, 5k gear score, that's fine for ICC. Not expecting 5.8k for ICC, so that's on us. But they did say, Titan Rune Dungeons is to help that. It's to get people to get the gear to then be able to experience the raids. And they're going to carry on that in Cata, but it's going to be a different system. So we're not going to have Titan Rune Dungeons. It is going to be probably more Heroic Plus or something, but there is going to be catch-up mechanics for gear, but they specifically said it's not going to be Titan Rune Dungeons. So I think that's at least quite interesting. They also asked if we could possibly get a roadmap of the future level caps. So now we're talking about Season of Discovery stuff. So anyone who's here for Season of Discovery, the cat stuff's out the way now. You can focus, listen. So what they've basically said is they've not really got a roadmap, and we knew this. They went over what the level caps are again, being 25, 40, 50, and 60. But they want to give each of these level brackets time for the metas to develop, so they can start seeing people, us, the community, doing crazy things and min-maxing and trying to pass in Black Fathom Deeps. They want all of that to unfold before they try and rush to the next level cap. Ultimately, no, there's not going to be a roadmap. It's going to be very much putting your finger in the air and going, oh yeah, now seems about the right time. And they're going to be vague on this intentionally because they've never done this before. How could they possibly know when is the right time? We're just going to have to play it by ear. Next was, will content from previous level caps remain relevant from chapter to chapter as the level cap is increased? Now, the answer to this really was pretty obvious, I would say. So actually the answer should be no. Because what they've basically said is, well, as people level alts, they're going to have to go and get runes. And, if you get to level 25, then they hope that even if the level cap's 40 and there's a new level up raid, they hope that people will get a group together at level 25 and go and do BFD. I think the way we play, I think that's wishful thinking. Just think about it. It's level 40, the 40 raid, the 40 level up raid is out, whatever that is. Let's say it's Scarlet Monastery, let's say it's Nomeregon, it doesn't matter. You're level 25 on an ult and you've just dinged. Are you really going to waste time trying to get people together to get a couple of items from BFD, which likely are going to be replaced in 5, 6 levels? Or do you just carry on questing, carry on powering through, get to 40? I do feel like every time a new bracket comes out, the older content will slightly become less relevant, which it's just like getting a new expansion, isn't it? When you get TBC come out, most of vanilla was irrelevant. You still go through it, but you don't stop along the way and start doing raids. So I kind of see it going the same way. But they did say, like the Ashenvale PvP event, there'll be new world bosses, there will be new content, obviously, each phase, which keeps filling it up. And then next, is it reasonable to assume that classic raids will eventually come to Season of Discovery as well, such as being able to acquire Atiesh? Now, we already knew this, and they basically just confirmed exactly the same thing. They just said, yes, of course, they're iconic raids. They wouldn't be removed. So, they could come with changes. Again, they referenced Season of Mastery and said they might get the changes like the Season of Mastery raid bosses. But ultimately, we're definitely going to be doing Molten Core. It wouldn't be a vanilla version, even though it's got mad changes, but it's still vanilla at its core. It wouldn't be vanilla without being able to do Molten Core and Blackwing Lair, would it? The next question was if there was any plans to introduce a new legendary item for Season of Discovery, such as the original Ashbringer Frostmourne. They really didn't answer this in any great detail, but ultimately they kind of said yes. I wouldn't say a new legendary is off the table. It just depends where this leads. It depends what sort of content they actually end up putting out, because I truly believe on the basis that we're seeing epics already for Black Fathom Deeps, I really think, seeing a new legendary in here at some point, it is just not off of the table. And they said, they're looking forward to exploring and continuing storylines, and they specifically mentioned Timbermoor. Let's go. Timbermoor raid. Confirmed. I do think we will see a Timbermoor raid, or at least a Timbermoor dungeon, to be fair. And then the next question is, what are you doing to address gold inflation, gold buying, and botting? We'll just gloss over this. They're doing exactly the same thing. It's the same generic answer that we get every time gold buying is mentioned. They're sending out a message, a post saying how many exploitative accounts have been banned. And they're battling it. They're improving systems. They're doing what they can do to fight botting, but it's an ongoing cycle. They come up with a new system to try and prevent botting. Botters find a way to get around it. That new system is now rubbish. They now need to make a new one. It's a fairly sort of it's a rough topic, and we've spoke about it so much that just move on. Next, it was about faction PvP balance in Season of Discovery, which they really enjoyed getting this question, because when they developed Hardcore Realms, they developed the ability to raise the cap on how many players can be on a realm, and they'll be doing exactly the same for Season of Discovery, because they think it'll be good to have as few realms as possible. And I've got to be honest, I absolutely agree. The less realms you've got, the more people you're forcing onto those realms, the more chance you've got of them being a little bit balanced. And that is literally precisely what they actually just said as well. So there'll be less realms, but there'll be more people on those realms, so you just naturally expect it to have a better chance at being balanced. But what they did say was really interesting, because it was about the Ashenvale World PvP event, and it doesn't actually start until both factions get to a balanced threshold. What that threshold is wasn't explained, but they will make ongoing changes to Ashenvale and events to keep the faction balance as best as they can. So that's interesting. It's going to be very much like Wintergrasp. You know, when it says threshold, I'm guessing, you know, if we were to say 55-45, and maybe the team on 45 who have got their faction representation as 45% might get a little buff or something. Like, who knows? But apparently, it won't start unless it's balanced. This question comes up a lot, whether they're going to buff or tune the world and tune instances, and ultimately, they've just said yes. We've spoke about this in other videos before, but they've said they understand people will be getting a lot of power from these runes, and they want players to feel powerful, but they have the ability to increase the health and damage of mobs in the world, and they also want to do that with raids, instances. You know, they want everything to feel challenging, but they also want you to start feeling powerful as you gain these runes. So it's a bit of a balancing act. It's exactly the same as it is in every expansion. You're fairly weak, you do less damage, you get more damage, you feel powerful, and the content does start to get trivialized a little bit, which, I mean, that is going to happen. It's inevitable, but obviously we don't want it like that off the rip. So it's good that they're going to be addressing that. They also got asked, is there a possibility we'll see a two-handed enhancement shaman viable as DPS? And basically, without spending too much time on this, the answer is no. They modelled it on the TBC and onwards version of the enhancement shaman, so their focus has been dual-wield. That's why they've got things like Lava Lash that was used as an example. They are open to everything, though, and maybe if they need to do it in the future, they will have to add a rune to be able to make it happen. So if you was excited for two-handed enhancement, play about with it. You might be able to make it work, but that is not how it's been tuned. They was then asked if there'll be a Scarlet Monastery raid, and I think this is one that everyone really wants to know and really hopes we see, including myself. It basically goes back to the same thing about having a roadmap or tuning content. You know, the world is their oyster at the moment, so there absolutely could be a Scarlet Monastery raid. The team is ambitious to add new content to Classic. That's what they've been saying. So I think as long as we keep the game pumping, keep it thriving, make them want to add content, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a Scarlet Monastery raid. But ultimately, in a Q&A like this, they can't say, yes, you're going to get one. Because what if week 1 Season of Discovery failed miserably? We know it won't, or we hope it won't, but if it did, they're not then going to sink resources into, you know, committing to something that they said they're going to release. So, of course, they're not going to say, yes, there's absolutely going to be one, but odds are they probably will. There was a question about making Smite Holy Priest DPS viable, or is Holy Discipline meant to be healers, but quite honestly, the answer that was given was a bit convoluted, and really all they needed to say was play about with your runes. You know, you're going to have different runes to be enable you to do different things. Penance don't only heal players, it does damage. You know, you might be able to make a sort of Holy Disc DPS build, but ultimately that isn't what was in mind. You know, the Holy and Disc, they may be able to do a little bit of damage, but ultimately they're healers. And the same way with Shadow is DPS. You wouldn't go Shadow and expect to be a healer. But they did say you could be Shadow and you could pick Penance up just to play about with it and have a little bit of like weird damage, not shadow damage, but you know, you'll be able to at least throw some heals around if you want. That's the whole point of Season of Discovery, isn't it, really? There's nothing set in stone. Play about, see what you can come up with. They did get asked what is the most radical change they'd be willing to implement, and again, there's not really anything to say here because ultimately they just spoke about the Ashenvale PvP event, adding new world bosses, PvP events in general, and new items, and, you know, BFD. Really, there's no change too radical. I think we've seen that. I mean, look at the classes. You know, look at all of these runes. We've got classes in a vanilla core version of the game we never thought we'd ever see. So I would say there's no change too radical. It's just how much time it takes and will it be successful? A really interesting one came out of this, where will the Season of Discovery server ratios be balanced? So as a human, as an orc, like your racial abilities, will they go through any changes? So they see it as very important and understand that racials defines the character, and they know people choose the race based on being optimal because that's how we play. They don't want to and they won't change any of these racials, but however, they did say there's certain racials that give things like weapon specialization, for example. They will add alternative ways for other players that are not that race to be able to get them. And they use priest as an example as well, being able to get a different ability based on race. In future phases, they're open to allowing the priest to get racials from other races through religion discovery. So there'll be these temples or these shrines that they was talking about that you'll be able to meditate at and all of this stuff, which that was data mined. Yesterday we was looking at that and we weren't sure what that was. So that sort of answers that, but they're going to be tied to some religion discovery. And then if you're a priest, you might be able to get like Fear Ward, for example, as a Night Elf priest. And then finally, will Season of Discovery end with server wipes like Season of Mastery, or will the server stay open for future content? They don't know. They can't really say right now because it's early days. You know, they've said already in 2 different interviews now, I believe, and they've basically repeated the same thing again, that they want the people who play Season of Discovery to go on and enjoy their character somewhere else, and you will be able to. No matter what happens, you'll be able to take that character somewhere. But, you know, odds are, as it stands at the moment, you're going to be taking it back to Classic Era, which will then drastically change your character. And then how's that going to work with the items that you obtained and stuff like that? I don't know, because they're not obtainable in Classic Era, even though it runs on 1.15, unless many of these new items get added to Classic Era as well, which is something I've not thought of. But ultimately, at the end of the season, your characters will go somewhere. You won't lose it. I mean, let's get excited for the season first. Let's enjoy the season. Let's not talk about the end. I don't want to think about it ending. But that basically wraps it up. As I say, you can go and watch the full interview, which is about an hour long. I wouldn't say you're going to get a great deal out of it more than what I've just given you, unless you're interested in retail, because there is, obviously, the first half an hour of it is pretty much all about the war with him. So if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, consider joining the channel as a member, follow me over on Kick, all that good stuff, and I'll see you on the next one.